Good morning, and as I look out at the audience, I see so many familiar faces, and my first reaction is, Jimmy would have loved to have been here today to have reunited, to have a reunion with a lot of these faces that have come from many miles away to be here today. And to me, I find that to be a personal disappointment that Jimmy is not here, at least physically, to have shared this reuniting of all his friends. It's very warming and very admirable. Jimmy, of course, asked me to come up here and speak a few words, but I feel like I'm going to be redundant because Doug and Christine pretty much have captured the real feeling of why we're here today, and that's to honor Jimmy. So let me kind of modify my little talk here. We all know that Jimmy passed away January 16th. A couple days later, I came back home and I grabbed my pencil and paper. And I sat down to write a few notes. And as I opened up my pad, there were a few remaining notes from a friend who passed away recently, about 15 months ago, Kelton, who was a very dear friend of Jimmy. They spent a lot of time together fishing and hunting and boating and working on projects. And that kind of brought back a lot of memories. And it was too short that Kelton has left us. And so as I'm reading over these notes, and it's kind of refreshing my memory, one of the first things that I wrote in Kelton's eulogy was an old adage. Excuse me. And the old adage is when a close friend dies, part of you dies with them. And I think that's very true. There's a void in my soul and my heart that Jimmy has passed. And no one can ever replace that. And when you think about it, every time you tell a story, you always start off by saying, do you remember, or how about the time? And all the stories that I had with Jimmy, and it goes back a long ways, all those stories are gone. Now you can share a story with a friend, but unless that friend was there and understands the story and understands the experience, it isn't quite the same. So I think a lot of my memories and a lot of my stories have now come to an end, because without Jimmy to keep them alive, they no longer have value. And I'm really going to miss that. I met Jimmy back in, I don't even know what year it was probably 57 years ago, back in the 4th grade. I don't even want to think about how far that was. I was on my bicycle in the neighborhood, and a whole bunch of kids, we were playing right by Jimmy's house. Every night we would gather there and play after school. And so it's really hard to try to condense or capsulize 57 years of memories down to 5 minutes. And we all know that some of Jimmy's stories could last up to 2 hours. Well, we made our way through school, and then after school, we spent 2 years in the military. After we got out of the military, I talked to Jimmy, and I convinced him to go over to Seminole Community College. And we were happy to do that. And while at Seminole Community College, we joined a fraternity, which produced many more memories and great times. And every summer, Jimmy and I, we just owed it to ourselves to take a guy's trip. One year we went up to Canada. And of course, the big trip was 1972. We went over to Europe, and there was 4 of us. We bought a 1964 Opel Kadett that we had to push to get the thing started. And we went from Spain to England. And we lived on about $2 a day. We ate plenty of bread, water, and cheese, and occasionally a bottle of wine. We didn't have the best accommodations, but I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. Excuse me. After Jimmy got his AA degree, Jimmy went to work, and I continued on to school. when Jimmy was working, he started buying some motorcycles and had a Harley Davidson. And at that time, I couldn't afford very much, so I had an old Kawasaki, Japanese motorcycle. I think I paid about $250 for it. It was noisy, it smoked oil, it was rattly, and when we used to ride together, if I got too close to Jimmy, he would wave at me, back of the line, back of the line. So I was reprimanded to get back of the line because I couldn't get anywhere near the Harleys. It just wasn't right. But that was fun. And I think that was the beginning of Jimmy's interest in a lifelong commitment with Harley Davidsons. Jimmy would often tell me about all the trips he took with the guys and the different places that he went, and it meant so much to him to be with a group of guys and go into these various places, North Carolina and other places around the country, and spoke very highly of the guys and the group of guys with a lot of respect and admiration for the group of guys. As Doug was saying, Jimmy was also very proud to be a veteran. And I'm not going to recap what Doug said. We know about everything that Jimmy went through. We had a lot of respect for Jimmy. Jimmy obviously served in Vietnam. And at the same time, I was talking about this guy, Kelton, who some of you know, and obviously some of you don't know. We were stationed up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And that was about 14,000 miles from Vietnam. And Jimmy and I would exchange letters. We would write back and forth. And Jimmy would tell me about some of his close encounters, as Doug was talking about. And of course, I would tell him about some of the close encounters we had up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was pretty tough, trying to keep Myrtle Beach, South Carolina safe, but somebody had to do it, and I guess that was the guy. And Jimmy thought these stories were very fascinating and amusing. But interesting enough, Jimmy said, I was very, very happy that you stayed in North Carolina because I didn't want two of us to be in hell at the same time. So I appreciated that. Jimmy got through Vietnam in one piece, but as Doug mentioned, there was some emotional deficit that happened. Jimmy went through a lot. And Jimmy told me late at night, some of these demons would raise their ugly head, and Jimmy would be very scared. And often he would have to go outside and calm himself down. And I guess that's the casualty of war. It may not be physical, but it is emotional. But Jimmy never lost his faith in his country, and he was very patriotic. And Jimmy would fly the American flag in his front yard, and I think that's wonderful. And Michael, as Doug said, Jimmy was extremely proud of you. Proud of you when you served your country, your dedication to country and to service. And I'm not going to go over what Christian and Doug said, but he was extremely proud. He talked about you to all of us constantly. The last couple of days in his life, I guess it was Friday and Saturday, we were visiting Jimmy. Jimmy was in one of those wonderful hospice beds that kind of in a semi-reclined position. And he was somewhat incoherent. I couldn't wake him up. He was sleeping pretty heavily, probably because of the pain medication. And his organs were probably beginning to shut down. And Michael said, he's laying in bed, he's sleeping, but every once in a while he says words. I can pick up a word or two. And Michael said, I think he's talking to Kelton. And I looked at Michael and I said, Michael, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that him and Kelton are having a conversation. And I can just really envision Jimmy and Kelton sitting around Kelton's backyard, around the pool, around Kelton's bar, Kontiki bar area that he built. That was Kelton's outside office. And I can just see Kelton and Jimmy sitting there, in one of their deep philosophical conversations, talking about politics, economy, social issues, foreign affairs, or anything that came to mind. So I really believe in my heart that Kelton had come down and was taking Jimmy by the hand to bring him home. So we're all going to miss Jimmy, and thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.